Hello and welcome to Quackalope, and today we're going to do a Kickstarter preview on Small Railroad Empires by Arcona Games. So this is actually the third in the Small Empire series. They've done a few other Kickstarters that have been fairly successful, and this is the first time that we've gotten to play one of that series, and it's been pretty enjoyable thus far.
No, this one was really interesting and really pleasurable to sit down and play. Small Railroad Empires is going to be a route building, a little bit of pick up and deliver, although that's not the feature, that's not the cornerstone of it.
No.
And then we have a little bit of resource management and then victory point scoring for kind of the end game condition, but really, this is going to focus down into a route building game. You're trying to make the most efficient sequence of railroads kind of placed around these different terrain types in order to take resources from one factory to a city that corresponds with or wants those type of resources, all the while looking at your secret scoring objectives and sort of end game victory conditions.
Yeah, there's a few things in here that you'll have to manage, but at the end of the day, this is a lighter game.
Yeah.
So usually when you hear train games, that's immediately worrisome for more of an introductory gamer, right? They usually involve a lot of things that you might not be aware of. But here,
this is
it's very approachable.
Accessible train game that still scratches sort of that train itch, which I found really satisfying when we played. So, if this is the first time you've seen a Quackalope video, hey, thanks for being here. We glad to have you.
Oh, for sure.
Hopefully you found us either through our own page or over on the Kickstarter page. If you found us on the Kickstarter page, make sure you take the time to hit that subscribe button down below. We bring aggressively high quality media content to as many different corners of the board game world as we can.
Yes.
So having you join the community helps show companies like Arcona Games that you appreciate what we're doing.
So thank you.
Along with that, we would like to go ahead and acknowledge and thank Arcona Games for sponsoring this preview. They reached out, wanted to get the prototype into our hands so that we could take a early look at this game and bring our honest feedback back to you. So the structure of this preview video.
Yeah, so it's actually going to be really simple and straightforward.
Not too complicated at all. We're going to start with giving you a overview of the game, not an official how to play.
No, not close.
But we're going to dig into the way the game actually functions, how a turn flow might look, and what you're going to be thinking about when you actually are playing this game.
Yep.
Then we're going to step to the side a little bit and talk from our own sort of play experience. Where do we think it plays best at?
Yep.
What are the elements that we find the most intriguing or things that we think help it kind of scratch that train itch in a way that we found satisfying? And then finally, we're going to talk about a few elements that you want to consider when you back this game.
Yep.
And what you can expect when it kind of gets to your table, right?
Yeah, for sure.
That's the structure. That's the flow. Thank you for joining us, and let's swing in. What is the main flow of this game? What's going on the table here?
So we are railroad magnates, and we're trying to build the most efficient routes possible from factories that have probably employed us to cities that require the resources that those factories are making.
Now, we just finished a game ourselves. Should I just clear everything so that we can show how it starts?
No, I think actually this is a great way of explaining what the game will look like and how it'll fix.
You don't want me to go ahead and wipe all of the trains off the board so that we can demonstrate that the game actually starts empty with open regions.
Well, we might want to, but I think this is a good way of showing. So, throughout the game, you'll be building those routes. What you'll do is that you'll grab some meeples and you'll start slowly but surely creating the routes that you need the most in order to create the longest possible routes, because there's different benefits that you're going to get. This is a little bit of that result. This took us about maybe 15-20 minutes. Really quick, really straightforward.
So what you're seeing here is you're going to have cubes on locations that are generating those resources, right? Those are going to be the things that you're taking to the cities. So your train needs to connect from one of those factories to one of these hexagons here. These hexagons are going to represent the cities that you're delivering resources to, and they all have their own requests and requirements. Along with that, the part of this game state that's actually going to be modular, so it's going to be able to change between game sessions, is going to be the terrain types you see down on the bottom. There is a cost to build on harder and more difficult styles of terrain. For instance, the forest is going to cost $1 to build on, the mountains are going to cost $3, and the lakes are going to cost $2. That's going to be the areas that you're pathing yourself over in order to get from a factory to a city. Now, like you were pointing out, the extent or the length of your railroad really comes into play.
And the reason why that's important is because depending on that length, you're going to gain different amount of victory points and a different amount of money. And money is really important in this particular game because, as Jesse just said, you need it to kind of forge your way through the wilderness and through this landscape.
You need money not only to pay to build in certain locations, but you can also extend your railroad a little bit faster by paying an extra cost. And with a higher player count, like a 3 or 4 player game, getting to some of those territories that have limited space for railroads to actually construct on them can be really crucial. So you might spend an extra $2 or $3 to get right beyond someone before they block you off or before they cut off your path. So there's a little bit of, it's not head-to-head, and it's certainly not take that, but there's a little bit of player interaction at those higher player counts that I find really intriguing. Well, I like the way it bumps up.
I would call it kind of like spatial control. For sure. Because depending on, like you said, with higher player counts, you're going to have instances where you might not just be able to go through a particular line of trains. So you're able to kind of section off things depending on how you build it out. So it's really interesting how it can form in that board.
So that's the main stuff that's going on the board here. You're trying to get these cubes across your route to end up at cities. Now, cities you can only deliver to once. So once you've delivered, you're going to put down a marker there showing that you've fulfilled that mission, and that actually becomes a station for you, right? So it's still a place you can transport through, but it will reduce the total score that you're getting for that railroad line. So if you're running it through a station, you actually have to pause and halt, so it's not quite as efficient as if you're running it on a direct line of trains. Therefore, you may not score quite as high.
Yeah, right? And speaking of scoring, that's actually one of the biggest parts of this game. Every time that you set up, you're going to select 5 achievements, and those achievements are going to give every single player around the board an objective to try and find so that they can score more prestige in order to win that game.
Well, there's 3 different main scoring mechanics, right? Building those routes is going to be a core one of them.
Yep.
However, you're also going to have an open tableau of 5 possible objectives that anyone around the game state can score. You get more points if you score them fast.
Yep.
And then you're going to have one of those secret ones in your hand that you can score on your own.
Yep.
And then finally, you're going to have your train cards.
And these are almost kind of like a set collection mechanic within the game, right?
Yes. Depending on what score you have out here, and then depending on what type of route you're trying to complete, these either add just a bonus victory point to some of your more efficient or more stylized routes, or if you have like Ardent Collector here or a Landscape Artist, you are in fact trying to build, construct, and gather trains in a way that is a set collection mechanic to some degree.
And I like that because it gives everybody a motive, right? You're not just building things for the sake of building, you have a particular objective that you must reach in order to be as efficient as possible throughout the game.
So let's go ahead and show off a turn, right? Just so we can display how this will actually function. We each have some of our meeples still left from the game that we just completed. And for sake of demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and remove that from this location because I have a route that trails the whole way up to the last city that I delivered to. So, for instance, on my turn, I get to play down 2 trains for free. Now, I could pay a bonus to play down more, but I don't think I'll need to in this situation. I'll pay $3 in order to play here on this mountainous region, right? That's going to be the value of it. I do score a victory point because there's a star in that location. So I'll just increase the degree to which I beat you.
How convenient for
And then any cities or factories are actually going to be free to build or construct in because we're trying to deliver there, right? So I'm going to put a free train down on that location. And then I'm going to start doing my delivery. I can do 1 cube per turn.
Yep.
So the 1 cube that I'm going to pick is going to be this brown cube all the way down here at my starting factory. This is actually where I began the game. So I've been trailing and building the route from that point.
Yep.
So I'm going to go ahead and add up my math, right? Every train is going to count as 1 in my route.
Yep.
And every station that I pass through, a town or city that I've already delivered resources to, will count as -2. So to start with, let's count up my trains. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 total trains. But I passed through 2 stations on my way there. So I'm looking at a total length of 10 to deliver this cube up here to the city, which will then score me points. For 9+, I'll score $3, which is what I paid for that mountain, so that's good. 2 victory points, and then I'll look here to see if there's any of these that I can achieve. For instance, if I delivered from an orange factory the whole way to a city, I'd be able to score an additional 2 points. Or if my track was longer than 9, now I've already scored this in this game, but let's say for demonstration's sake, if my track was longer than 9, which it was, I could go ahead and score either the top or bottom of this depending on when and how I got to that position. So that'd be a turn for me, and then it would move over to the other players, right? You'd take a very similar turn.
So for example, let's say that instead of focusing on a city this turn, I wanted to build out my resource capability. So I would kind of target a factory that I might not have available. So let's assume that I've never been here before. And let's try to build towards that direction. So first, by placing in the sands or desert area, that's a free action. However, if you connect from a sand to another sand, that's going to cost you 1.
A little bit more expensive to go across the desert.
Too much sand, man. Then after that, I will decide to push my native turn a little bit more and pay 2 money to build a 3rd track.
Yep.
And that will let me finally get to this final factory that hopefully in the future will get repopulated with more cubes so that I can now start delivering yellow.
Now that's a key element. So the 2 main head-to-head factors that you're balancing when you're playing in this game state. In a 3 or 4 player game, every location can only have up to 2 trains or 2 constructions on them. So if you're moving through a location, there's a chance you're blocking someone else's access to that pathway. So you might want to pay extra to get past that, right?
And soon.
The other thing is going to be the resources of the cubes down here. This is a factory that I've already existed at. So the yellow cube that was there, I've actually already spent. But that's okay in your case, because as we move up this track, these are all going to repopulate at certain time periods or certain sections of the game, right? So once we've made it to 8 victory points or 17 victory points, the board will repopulate at all the factories, giving us one last chance to use our routes and deliver those resources to the different cities we've extended ourselves to.
If there are enough cities left over.
If there's enough cities left over, and assuming that I don't deliver that ahead of you, because we are now squabbling head-to-head for that resource at that location.
Yeah, and one of the things that's really interesting about this is it might be a small board, but it definitely doesn't feel like a small landscape once you are traveling and laying down those tracks.
No, and I think this is a decent time to translate from kind of an overview of what the game is into some of the areas that we found kind of interesting or compelling when playing this game. The end scoring is just going to be on this victory point track. The stars that you gain throughout the course of the game are what is going to lead to that. Outside of that, man, this really does feel like a train game.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because it is a small game. Like most train games are these big box like epics. And I could play this in a solid 30 minutes, teach someone to play it in about 5, and have a good time.
Yeah, so for a filler train game, I think it hits a lot of positive marks for me.
Sure.
You have the variability of the board. That'll never be the same. You can kind of rearrange that. There's recommended setup, but you don't necessarily have to follow that. So every game will be a little bit different. You'll have something different to kind of like tackle and solve. So there's a different puzzle every time. I liked a lot the idea of having different objectives that kind of inspire me to take different approaches to how I would build my route, right? And above all, and I think this will be shown much more so with more players, is the capability of sectioning off certain areas, like creating a barrier so you cannot access these cities ever again.
Yeah, I find that really compelling. At 3 or 4 players, it becomes this head-to-head sort of really, really territory control style game, right? Like you said, if I just go up your route with you, then we've cordoned off a whole side of the map for ourselves.
And interesting enough, you can still kind of stem off later on back into that 100%. Section that you didn't section off. So there's a lot of variability and a lot of options for players that are trying to be sneaky about what they're doing.
I think for me, the biggest thing that I like about this is the more accessible train games that I've played typically lean into the pick up and deliver mechanic of train games, right? And I don't see this, honestly, as a pick up and deliver game much at all. It's there. The mechanic's there for sure. You're trying to connect resources to cities, but because of a limited style of resource and a limited type of resource that each city wants, I see this much more as a route building and sort of efficiency management game. I'm trying to connect the dots, sort of like drawing a picture, right, a numbered picture, but I'm doing so by trying to connect my pathway, by trying to extend my railroad as much as possible, by trying to lock off or get access to locations before you do or before other players do. I like that puzzle.
Yeah, and so I think I would do it in orders of priority, right?
Sure.
In terms of mechanics, what is the thing that you'll mostly be focusing on? Definitely route building is number 1.
100%.
However, pick up and deliver in this particular game is how you actually win, right?
It's there, but it isn't the focus of the game for
exactly.
me.
So
I like
it would be
that
number
this
2.
is a route building game. And it scratches that itch really well.
And when we were playing this, I kind of got that feeling of almost Snake. You know, when you're like building out and trying to be as lengthy as possible.
Except
while
here,
consuming.
you can go ahead and eat your own
tail. You can
tail.
stem, yes, exactly.
Because that would allow me to go...
The only thing is that you can't double back ever on yourself, right?
But
you
I
can't
wouldn't
ever
need
have.
to. I
exactly.
could go all the way around and over and up and in.
And yeah, you can even start from here and then do this maybe, right?
Yep.
So you can. So it's really interesting how or when you start your route from.
Yep.
And so at a certain point, depending on how long the game has gone on, it's very likely that you'll always be able to do 9 or more.
And thematically, I like a train conductor standing here in this city going, Tim, we could probably run those steel beams up the north. That'd be a little bit quicker than... He's like, oh, no, sir, my train only runs south. Tim, that's going to take you 7 days total. I know, and I'm going to bill him every penny for it.
And speaking of the stations...
I like the extended routes.
No, and speaking of the stations, I like that idea that it's a crux, right? As soon as you get there, you're able to kind of reorient your train just like an actual station would.
Sure.
And you have a pit stop, so thematically, there's some good little small details in there that help tie the overall narrative, if a train game ever needs a narrative, into the gameplay.
All games need a narrative, Jan.
I will say one thing, and I think this is something that the publishers are already looking into. Train games are usually associated with stock markets. But during our gameplay, for this particular game, it wasn't really necessary. Sure, it could have added a little bit of flavor to it, but I think we had enough decisions, and it was pretty crunchy for a filler game that it was really enjoyable without that need of a stock market.
Here's one thing I can say around that, though. They are looking at expansions and modules, whether they're in-box expansions or Kickstarter exclusives or like extra content. I'm sure some of them will be announced as the Kickstarter goes on to fill out some of those classic train game elements. If that'll be a part of the main box or a stock market mechanic or a resource management mechanic, I'm not entirely sure, but I know there is additional content that they're playing with that's still in prototype stages that we didn't get set here for the preview.
Yeah, but I was still surprised that it worked.
No,
usually
100%.
stock markets in these types of games are quintessential for it to work and function and be entertaining. But I think because of the length of time that you're playing, it's breezy and great.
It doesn't go on too long. And again, this isn't about the financial element of the game. Your money isn't your victory points. The stock going up and down doesn't matter as much to you. This is route building. You're the conductor. You're not the banker. You're not the owner of the railway, right? You're the person that's sitting there pulling a lever, piling in coal, and running down a route to get the resources.
And that's a really good point that I hadn't thought of it when we were playing. You're actually incentivized to spend all the money you can whenever you can.
Yep.
So yeah, that's a really good point because usually, I think in most train games, your money is one of the main factors for victory at the end, right?
It can be. Yeah, it certainly can be. And so if they were going to bring in a stock element, I would probably honestly like to see it not deal with your money track as much, but deal with your victory points to some degree, right? Or deal with some of your secret objectives. Whether the stock market would include or pair well with some of these hidden objectives that you're going after.
Yeah, but with all that being said, I think we've spoken enough about kind of like our own opinions.
Sure.
How about we give what they should focus on if they back?
Some of the things to consider when you back this game. First off, it is a 2 to 4 player game. I'm not sure if there's going to be a solo mode available. Please check the Kickstarter to see if there's a route building or efficiency. I could see it being a game that could facilitate a solo.
Yeah.
It really depends on how those mechanics would work or what their idea for the end state of the game is supposed to be. But at 2 players, it isn't as head-to-head as 3 or 4, right? We're excited about the idea of sectioning off, having some territory control elements, really squabbling for some of these resources. But at 2 players, it is entirely based around efficiency and route building.
And it was great.
Is a nice, thinky puzzle. And because you're playing on, randomized... And because you're playing on randomized sides, it can start anywhere you want. From turn 1, when you place down your very first train, you're trying to map and think through and achieve the puzzle the same way your opponent is. You're playing the same game, but it's different, and the puzzle's different, and it's always reworking itself. And I really like that.
And another thing that we've stated a few times, or at least I have, this is a lighter game, right? Don't come into this thinking, oh, this is going to be the train game in my collection, this heaviest thing, not even close.
This won't be the heaviest one, but this could be a train game in my collection.
It could be the introductory
100%.
Train game.
Yeah, for sure.
For whoever you want to bring into bigger titles, because it's so approachable and easy and digestible that you can get this to the table so quickly and so efficiently.
I would sit down and run this at 2 players or 3 players in a second in about 20 to 30 minutes easy.
And I think it shows a lot of the basics that you'd see in a larger train game, which is what you always want from an introductory game. So when you back, make sure that you understand this is a lighter game for more inexperienced players, and if you're an experienced player, more of a filler that you can entertain between some games or your larger train games. Who knows?
I don't know. I just really genuinely enjoyed sitting down and playing this one enough that we don't have to record gameplay. We don't have to do anything additional, and I still really want to play you at it again. There's things in puzzles that I want to solve, and it scratched a really nice itch. The other element that I'd like to point out is this is a small publisher.
Yeah.
I believe it is the designer who owns the company and runs everything, but it is not a brand new publisher, right? So when it comes to security and delivery, they've delivered 3 other fully complete titles that have had beautiful components and good reaction from the community and the fan base, right? So if this looks like a game for you, I would say you can back confidently. Which is important. Like that is a factor to consider when you're considering Kickstarter costs.
I know it's one that I always look at.
So, that's sort of our preview. That's our rundown of Small Railroad Empires. This one's a good one.
No, it was definitely fun. I'm looking forward to playing it again.
It's a shame you don't get to take the prototype home.
I don't remember us talking about that. Is that the final decision?
Yeah.
Oh, well, okay. Arcona, please help.
Whatever the case. Thank you for being here.
Sorry, do it again.
Whatever the case, thank you for being here. Whatever you do.
Remember to do the important thing.
But just finish it.
Oh, okay. Remember to do
No, I'm going to keep the whole...
Oh, no, you're not.
Yeah, this is...
No, you're not. Just remember to do the important thing. Get out and play some games, everyone. We'll see you guys next time.
You forgot the thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.